Hi, everyone, and welcome to our scholarship information session on the Truman Scholarship. I'm Dr. Lynn. I oversee the Nationally Competitive Scholarships Office, and with us today, we have our very special guest, Justin Bray. Justin was our 2021 Truman nominee, and he is currently serving as our 2020-2021 UNG Newman Fellow. So, Justin, thank you for being here. We appreciate you coming.
Of course, I'm happy to be here.
We're going to walk through what the Truman Scholarship is, and Justin is on hand to talk about the application process and to offer his own personal insights as a student who's been there and done that. The Truman was established by Congress in 1975 as a memorial to Harry Truman, and it awards scholarships to college students who want to attend graduate school in preparation for careers in government or elsewhere in public service. The awards are $30,000 for a master's or a professional degree. In addition to that award, scholars receive leadership training through the Leadership Week in May, a summer internship after graduation, which can be very valuable. They also receive career and graduate school counseling and some special internship opportunities within the federal government. The scholarship itself is fairly selective. However, the process is also selective. So we encourage students to apply for it because just being selected as UNG's nominee or one of UNG's nominee is a huge honor. Our institution is limited to only 4 students we can nominate per year, so it can be quite competitive. Last year, Justin was our only nominee, and he was an excellent representative. So this is what I think about when I think about Truman, and Justin can chime in here if you'd like. The big thing they're looking for is someone who wants to be a change agent. So someone who is already working to create change within their local community, and that could be an on-campus community, an off-campus community. So someone who's looking to create change in the government and nonprofit sectors or in the education sector. Justin, any thoughts there as to what they're looking for? I know that you've done a lot of research on the Truman as well.
Yeah, I personally, I know I tried to check as many boxes of those qualifications as I could, I guess, because I have previous work in nonprofit, both professionally and volunteering, but I also wanted to make sure I was doing things in local government and to an extent in school government as well. And so I don't think that's necessarily a requirement as much as it is just the path that I chose myself.
Awesome. So eligibility, you need to be a full-time student. We're really looking for juniors, and they define junior as someone who's going to graduate between December 2022 and August 2023. There is an exception if you're graduating within 3 years, and we can talk about that, but really we're looking for a junior. You do have to be a US citizen, and you have to plan to pursue a graduate degree and a master's degree in one of the fields in public service. So that could be an MPA, it could be a JD, it could be a master's in education. The other requirement for the Truman, there's always a payback when we have money, right? And that is that you work for public service for 3 of the first 7 years following the foundation's funded graduate degree. So that could be in a nonprofit sector, that could be in education, or that could be in the government. But that is sort of their payback. They want to make sure that that $30,000 did go to what they wanted it to go towards. Okay. So employment and public service, this is a question we get a lot. These are the 4 places where we typically see successful Truman applicants headed. One reason why we wanted to include this slide also is that when you're writing your application, it can really help to have the end goal in mind and to work backwards as you're working through the essays. And we'll talk about the essays in a minute. So first, the employment, government at any level, also the uniformed services. So any cadets out there who are looking to commission, this could be a great program for you as well. The school system, both public and private schools, and then any public service oriented nonprofit. So the whole great big realm of nonprofit organizations is open. Okay, so the criteria page here. I'm going to look at the left-hand side. This is what I really want to focus on. So first, how do you know that you are going to be a really strong candidate for the Truman? Do you have an extensive record of leadership and community service? And so Justin, you definitely did. You worked for Books for Keeps for quite a long time. And the next one is, do you have a commitment to career in public service? What are you doing right now that's preparing you to actually take that next step? You need to have a strong desire to influence public policies or education programs. So you need to put words into action. So it's one thing to volunteer quite a bit, but typically students who are taking it a step beyond volunteering and helping to create programs, we see those as really affecting that desire to influence public policies. And then outstanding leadership. And here, really looking for leadership that's connected to your goals. So we love leaders of any kind, but bonus points if that leadership is directly connected to what you're working on. Okay. Over on the right-hand side, I don't want to spend too much time on this right now, but some challenges are little leadership, lack of investment or sustained involvement in a specific field, and then maybe not fleshing out that graduate plan. So for the Truman, it's helpful to have what we might call a platform, right? There's one thing that you want to work towards, one degree that you're on your way to getting, and one problem in society that you are going to solve when you get there. Justin, would you mind talking a little bit about your platform as it was in your application?
Yeah, so you mentioned before that I work for a nonprofit called Books for Keeps, and what Books for Keeps really tries to do is provide access and equity to learning materials and relevant, reading materials so that students and children can pursue learning and success in any way that they define it as. And so I guess my platform specifically, and what I was trying to do and proposed in my essays and my application, was that I wanted to continue to reform education and the education system to match that idea and that concept, to help students, help children pursue success in any way that they would like to pursue success. And the way I specifically did that, and that was the big challenge for me. You mentioned frequent challenges before, is that I start really big and I try to get really small, and that took me a little while to really define that. But the way that I wanted to do that is really doing a lot of research in what things or what concepts or what ideas could we pursue and what issues could we solve and make the biggest impact. And what my research showed me was that children birth to 5, that's the realm, that early childhood education, and that time is when they are most affected by outside influence. And so providing an avenue and a route towards high quality childcare, for instance, at low cost or free to those that need it the most, would be the best way to affect that change. That's what I wrote towards.
Okay, great. And then you paired that with a graduate program to get you there, right?
Yes, I did. Yeah. And I'll say, like, the Truman itself, I thought, I wanted to go towards an MPA myself, but the Truman, through the research doing this application, really helped me understand that there are bigger programs and I could dream a little bit bigger and kind of make more change through the pursuit of more education. So I paired it with an MPA, and a JD was my desired avenue.
That's great. And we'll have to circle back in a minute. I probably should have started with that. What's the bonus for this application? It is a pretty time-consuming application, but the majority of students who go through it do say that they take away some real gains from it. So if I don't take us back to that, let's definitely go back to that, because I think that's definitely true. It forces you to think about what you want to be when you grow up. And it can be overwhelming, but it does help you figure out some potential avenues you might not have known before. So we've talked a bit about the essays, and that's the next section I wanted to focus on. That's the heart of the application. As any scholarship application is several essays. The Truman is one of the toughest applications that our students do. It can be very time consuming because there are a lot of short essays that, taken together, make a personal statement. And they help sell that platform that we talked about. So for the Truman, there's the online Truman application, basically your resume that you input online. We do need official transcripts. There are 8 essays, and again, don't let that scare you. They're short. They are snapshots. We'll talk about them in a second. And a policy proposal. And the policy proposal, again, connects to your platform. You're proposing, you're identifying a problem in society and proposing how you might go about solving it. And then there are 3 letters of recommendation. The Truman is unique in that they're very pointed letters. We have to identify letter writers who can speak to your leadership abilities. That is a single letter. Another one to your commitment to a career in public service. And then the last letter is your intellect and prospects for continuing academic success. So that's sort of the as Justin said, the bird's eye view of all of the different pieces that we need. I pulled these three because these, in my mind, are the most important essays, and they're also the most time-consuming essays. They are numbered. You'll see on the Truman application, there are numbers for each of the sections. So the short essays that we tend to work on first are the leadership example. They're looking for a specific example of your leadership. That's a paragraph. A public service example. You want to talk about what you've done in terms of public service. And actually, that is the wrong prompt there that I pulled. I'll need to come back to that. But the public service example is actually to define a meaningful public service activity that you participated in over the past few years. Ignore that. And then finally, additional information. This is kind of a catch-all where anything that's not addressed in your application you can come back to. But what it does is it allows us to reveal the person behind the accolades. A lot of the essay questions are focused on things that you have done in your past or things that you're going to do. And the additional information lets you be a person and talk a little bit about who you are. So Justin, I wanted to stop and ask you if there are any things that you would tell students to focus on in these, if you wanted to talk a little bit about the leadership example and the public service example and how you approached them.
Yeah. I remember in my experience, these flip-flopped a bunch. Like I thought that 7 would be one thing and one experience, and 8 would be one experience. And then I flip-flopped a bunch, and then I brought that to you for guidance, and you flip-flopped a bunch. And then we eventually settled on something that married the two. And so I thought that was really fantastic, is like trying to find the through line for all of these essays really helped. And that was a really valuable experience for me because it made me a better writer as well. Just trying to figure out how do I connect all these things in some way, almost like transitioning from paragraph to paragraph, but a little bit different because you're telling a bigger story than just one specific instance. The one essay that I think was the hardest for me was probably number 14, because I can talk about things I did pretty objectively because they happened. But something I learned through this experience, and I'm still learning and working on, is saying that, yeah, I did those things and I'm responsible for X, Y, and Z. And they wouldn't have happened had I not done X, Y, and Z. And so don't be afraid to say you did the things and say they wouldn't have happened had you not done the things, I think is really important. And I tend to be a fairly bubbly and kind of purple prosy kind of person. And so I really got to kind of be myself in 14. I thought that was really fun. So I got to kind of give a bit more explanation and context for why I did the things I did in the previous 7 essays.
Yeah, I loved your essay 14, and the Truman Foundation is looking for that personal quirkiness or excitement in 14. They love question 14 because it gets, again, to see the person behind all of the accolades. And to Justin's point, choosing a leadership example and a public service example, these can be really difficult. And yes, I remember especially with yours, Justin, we flip-flop back and forth because so much of your leadership was already tied up in public service. And how did we choose which one was the best? So that's part of the process of writing the application and working with our office is we'll be your sounding board. We'll help you kind of think through what's going to fit best where. And typically when we start writing these, we ask students to brainstorm tons of different answers, and then we'll go through and start drafting and see which one's going to work out to be the best. All right, so those are the big ones. But again, 2,000 characters, that's not that much. That's a paragraph. And the real challenge gets to be, how do you cut down a whole leadership example into 2,000 characters? Another tip of the office is to overwrite, to write a lot on the page, and then we can help cut it back. I grouped these next ones. I think it's a little bit more palatable this way. Taken together, all of these essays tend to present as a personal statement. When you write for scholarships or when you write for a job, a lot of times you're asked for a personal statement. The way that Truman does it is it's like the different parts of a personal statement kind of parted out into different questions. So I call these the career vision items. You want to tell us about the problem or need of society that you're going to focus on. Again, that's that platform issue that you'll come back to in your policy proposal. Item 10 is always a fun one. What are your 3 most significant classes? It's the shortest question on there. And we encourage you to think about, maybe think outside the box some. I think students always think it's a trick question. I don't know how they use it. Honestly, it's kind of a wild one, a wild card, but it's a fun one. Justin, any thoughts on it, that most significant classes?
Yeah, that one was really tough because I was I think that we started this process when I was coming out of my core classes, and I thought, I don't have a very like a real robust answer for this, but I think I was coming at it the wrong way in the end. Is that I was trying to think of like significant moments in these classes, and really it was more of like almost like a bullet point. They were so short, so trying to figure out those elective classes and associating those in some way, or a conversation I had with a professor, or something I still think about when I think of my time in those classes. It was kind of how I ended up writing those answers for that one.
That's great feedback. The next three you can kind of take together, and that's your graduate professional plans, your first job after grad school, and then your first job 5 to 7 years down the road. So again, to Justin's point, this really makes you think long-term. What are you going to do? How are you going to get there? The graduate professional plans, you do want to be really, really focused in these. They want you to identify not only, an MPA, but where and why. Why do you want to go to this MPA school? What is it going to offer you? Your first job after grad school, and then the 5 to 7 year plan, they want you to think big too. So especially that 5 to 7 years, where can you see yourself in those years? And even in the graduate professional plans, think big. Maybe your MPA is going to be at Harvard. Justin, I think, was yours at, trying to remember.
Georgetown.
That's right. Exactly. Think big. Do you want to talk a little bit about these? Actually, I think you probably can give more advice on how you approached those three.
Yeah. It was just a bunch of, it was a bunch of research that went into it, and a lot of dreaming and looking at different schools and kind of really removing the barrier of proximity or financial stress or those sort of things, and really thinking through, like, if I could go anywhere, where would I go? And then kind of working back from there, because if I could go anywhere, I would go to all sorts of places. And so I kind of started there, and I was like, well, I'm married, so I was like, my spouse doesn't want to go to anywhere cold, so let's step back. And, and so we kind of, you can kind of mix and match after that. And so you could kind of figure it out from there. But I know that for me personally, I wanted to affect change in education and the legislation that affects education in our system that students are going through right now. And so it made sense to me to go to Georgetown with all of their ties specifically to their educational research facilities that they have on campus in their master's programs, and also the way they approach their MPP and their JD programs, the way that they're both very intertwined, and both those offices work together, and also all the opportunities that school and university has to work with like certain departments on our international capital. And so all of those things tied together made sense to me. It wasn't just going somewhere prestigious, it was going somewhere where I could foresee myself making connections that would be beneficial in long term. So that's kind of how I went about it.
That's a great way to think about it. And our successful candidates in the past have been very, very intentional in the same way, thinking about not only is this a big name, but what specific programs are within their program. And proximity also matters. A lot of our students have chosen the DC area because it, as Justin mentioned, it is a place where you can connect with folks who can make a difference. Okay, the other big part of it is the policy proposal. And this one can be intimidating if you've never written a policy proposal before. We in the office are here to help and support you in that. And we oftentimes send your policy proposal out to someone who is maybe a specialist in the field that you're looking at to get more feedback. Essentially, you want to identify a problem, suggest a proposal, and then suggest some implementation challenges. When we're looking at the Truman as a whole, the policy proposal, though, is less important than the other essays. So that is something really good, I think, for all of us to remember. Students can get really focused on that policy proposal, and they're really looking at questions 1 through 14, and then the policy proposal is kind of the secondary component. You do have limited space to examine this policy issue. And again, the policy issue needs to be part of your platform. You want to look back at item 9, that problem that you want to address in society. And again, that's the problem that you're going to grad school to address, and pull that into the policy proposal. It is presented in the form of a memo, and you identify the person that can take action on it. So that's another step that can be a little bit difficult, is figuring out who can actually make a difference on this. Who do I send this to? You're not going to blanket mail it to the governor or the president, who specifically has the power to accomplish this. My biggest piece of advice in this is keep it small. The more local, the better. Justin, thoughts on how you approach this one?
This one was difficult for me because for the rest of the application, I was thinking really big, and then I had to flip the script and think really specific, like you said. But it's very much in the same way that people always tell you, I guess, to address your job application to someone specifically, or address it to a specific entity or a committee or board. Like that's kind of the same thing. And then think about what that committee or that board or that entity would think about your proposal, and what you would need to know to kind of combat that perception, I guess. And then what I wrote on was just trying to make sure that I could find precedent for the thing that I wanted to propose, and how we could bring that into Georgia. And so that's kind of starting really big and getting really small. I hope that helps.
No, it does. And I think yours turned out really, really strong. Obviously, you worked for a very long time on trying to make sure we had the right audience and brought all the right data. And so again, there are references allowed. And so there is quite a bit of research that can go into this. And I love that you mentioned precedent. I think that is a great thing to think about too, as you're developing the policy proposal. Where, and for you in specific, I remember you tried to find where a similar policy or similar approach was implemented in order to substantiate why yours was doable and necessary, which I think is very smart as well. All right, so it's a big application. I just want to say that we recognize it's a big application, and so we want to support you and get you started as early as possible. It is a doable application, though. We have had a Truman winner several years ago, John Blessing, and we've had some semifinalists as well. And again, just being nominated as UNG's nominee is a very impressive accolade and honor. Our application deadlines, by December 1st, we want to see a draft of your application. So hopefully in the next month or so, you'll start working with us and we can see some of these drafts, start giving you feedback. January 7th, we will announce nominees. And then on February 1st, that is when the actual application is due. So it's a tight timeline, unfortunately, and we have winter break kind of right there in the middle, but I do typically take drafts over the break and give feedback. That UNG nominees announced, that is if we have more than 4 applicants. There are some years where we do not have the 4 applicants. That's the reason for the early deadline. So you can think of December 1st as that's the day you want to basically declare that you want to do it, right? Make sure you have a draft to us. Hopefully we've been in contact over this next month. That draft is just a snapshot. That draft is not the final. That is just to make sure that you're working on the application. All right, it's always good to know how competitive this is as we're getting in. And Justin, I don't know that you've seen these numbers, but last year's Scholars Facts, there were 62 Truman Scholars chosen from more than 845 candidates. So 8% selection rate, it's pretty competitive. Again, they choose typically 1, maybe 2 from each state. So it can be very competitive, and it depends on the year. Some regions are more competitive. You will compete within the state of Georgia, but within the Southeast region. So I think it's Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, and Tennessee. They all do the interviews. In Florida, I think. They all do interviews and they are reviewed together. So that gives you a sense of how competitive it is. But again, and to Justin's point, even though it's competitive, even though it's an uphill battle, there's a lot of good stuff that comes from the application process. Justin, do you want to chime back in there?
Yeah, I will definitely say, and I've said this to you before, and I mean it wholeheartedly, that this was one of the best experiences I've had thus far at UNG. And it's something that I can attribute to growing as a writer. I may not have been given the Truman Scholarship, but I'm pretty positive, and I can say confidently that this experience has led me to be I've received grant awards for my professional career. And so I still hear Dr. Lynn in my head when I'm being too verbose, or I'm not being specific enough, or I hear the question of why or what are you talking about as I'm trying to explain a program narrative in a grant form. And so there's real application, I will say, from this process that I apply every day to my real job. And if you're somebody that's interested in this, you'll probably find yourself in the same situation I'm in one day too, where you're going to be doing stuff like this a lot. So I think that it's a very worthwhile opportunity.
Thank you. Yes, we joke that I sound like a 2-year-old when I comment on your essays, that I keep asking why. Justin, would you mind also talking a little bit, and this may have been more on the Newman side, but I think it did help with the Truman as well, the networking that came out of applying for these scholarships as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I got to meet other professionals through the Truman Scholarship, other doctors and other like-minded individuals and people that I aspire to be like, and to have the same sort of I guess resume experience as they do as well. And so just that review process was really awesome. And the Newman Fellowship itself, I've met another several hundred people all across the country that are doing similar stuff to what I'm doing right now as well. And so it's just been really neat to be able to connect with all those people and to find other folks that are interested in the same stuff I'm doing, and not just like big brain, like nonprofit change agent, but more like specifically people who want to help education reform and resource access and equitable delivery and all those things. And so there's something there, I think, for everybody, no matter what exactly it is you want to affect.
Thank you. Yeah, we find a lot of our scholarship applicants, they benefit from the networking, from meeting other professors here, getting feedback, and they may know someone in the nonprofit world that you're in, may introduce you. And we just find with scholarships, a lot of times, because you start thinking bigger, you start making connections and reaching out to people you may not have originally reached out to. We also find that students who complete the scholarship process are more willing to potentially apply for those big name grad schools that they may not have thought about in the beginning. Okay, so our dates to remember. So just remember, we need to see some drafts by December 1st if you're going to apply. The actual application deadline is in February. They have a very, very fast turnaround. They let you know if you're a finalist by February 19th. They do a weekend of reading. It is a very, very nerve-wracking, nail-biting kind of thing. It wasn't as bad this year because they weren't all over Twitter, but usually they announce via Twitter whenever a region has notified. Yeah, Justin, you're kind of laughing there. It's not a great time.
It's a very stressful time.
Yes, it's that's the only time of the year I'm ever on Twitter, is just double checking that. If you are selected, there is an interview portion that you go to that is in Atlanta typically, and we do mock interviews to prepare you for that. That's kind of down the road, so I won't talk about it too much right now, but it is, again, another great professionalization step. And then they do announce the scholars on April 15th. Okay, so we haven't scared you off. You're interested, you want to try this, we would love to meet with you. I take the lead on our Truman applications because they require that institutional nomination, but this is all of our contact information. The easiest way to get in contact with someone from the office is ncs@ung.edu. Send an email there and it will get to me, and we'll make an appointment to sit down and talk about the application. Another great thing to do if you're not already doing it is to follow us on Instagram. We post all of our workshops there. We post opportunities there, reminders, etc. Wrong way. And then again, this is our entire team. You have me, Dr. Hightower, who was on the call a little earlier, and Dr. Quinto over on the Gainesville campus. We all do advise for specific groups of scholarships, but we cross-read all of the applications. So I think, Justin, yours was read and you had feedback from all of us. So let's get started today. We look forward to working with you, and please do email ncs@ung.edu when you're ready to get started. All right, thank you so much.